It's early in the morning and the air is crisp. The sky is still holding on to the darkness of night, and you blink yourself awake. You lace up your shoes, press play on your favorite playlist, and allow the music to fill your ears. As you step out into the quiet, it is the exact same thing that you have done countless times. But as your feet hit the pavement, a thought creeps in. What if I don't make it home? If you have ever tightened your grip on your keys, scanned your surroundings not once, but multiple times, turned to look over your shoulder, ran faster, shared your location, or desperately searched for someone to be nearby, you are not alone. For far too many women, the simple act of running, of reclaiming peace, strength, and freedom has ended in tragedy. These are women who have trained hard, loved harder, and are more than just the victims. Their vanished footsteps echo a reality that is rarely spoken about, yet always on our minds. Fear is a companion that many women carry on every single run. Welcome to Girl Gone Running, a Tragedy with a View series where I tell the stories of the women who went out for a run and never came home. It is not about her death, it is about her life, the voice she no longer has, and the warning signs that we can't afford to ignore. Because what is happening on these days is not random. And as we dig deeper, we find that it is changing everything. Welcome back to Tragedy with a View. Hello and welcome back. I am your host, Kayla. Thank you for joining me on your Saturday. I appreciate you being here. Just outside of San Antonio, Texas is a small and homey town of Olmos Park. With a population hovering in the area of 2,000 people for decades, the town truly gives other small towns a run for their money. Streets are lined with oak trees and sycamore trees, and the homes are large and elegant. With prices for the homes being in the area of $700,000 to $1 million, the community has done a good job of making sure that not just anyone can be there, if you know what I mean. Before becoming a community, the land was known as Camp John Wise, where the U.S. Army used the land for balloonists, which I had to look that up because I wasn't sure exactly what that meant. So during the Civil War, aerial reconnaissance was done by the use of a version of hot air balloons, often by filling the balloon with coal gas. During the Civil War, they were used to learn enemy positions in real time. So these balloons were always tethered to the ground via a cable. And this cable also enclosed a telegraph line so that the person or people inside the balloon that was roughly 1,000 feet in the air could quickly communicate with those on the ground. I digress though. Olmos Park is now its own incorporated city. It is surrounded by San Antonio in Texas. And it has its own government, its own rules, its own police force. And in 1991, Chief of Police Mike Olavig basically didn't have a lot of crime. The worst calls that he got were burglaries, and those only happened a handful of times a year. But then that would all change because on August 5th, they received a phone call about a woman who had been violently stabbed. She was still alive, at least at the moment, but she was fading quickly. And the woman who was stabbed was Valerie McPherson. Born Valerie Evans to her parents, Billy and Audrey, on October 16, 1958, she lived a life that required frequent moves, as you would expect with a military family. She was born in Japan and, along with her two sisters, would go from station to station. Finally, in 1976, she seemed to settle and she graduated from San Antonio's Winston Churchill High School and then started taking classes at San Antonio College. It seems that she might not have received a degree, but we do know that she majored in art. It was sometime after her college experience that she met Sandy McPherson. So Sandy's family owned a ranch in Sonora, Texas, which was only about a 2.5-hour drive northwest of San Antonio. Sandy was living in San Antonio, but that is not where he met Valerie. They met while visiting Colorado for separate skiing adventures, and then they knew just right away they were goners. In May 1987, they got married, and Val moved to Sonora with Sandy to help run the ranch, which was the McPherson 4M Ranch. This ranch covered 12,000 acres of land and offered lodging for their hunting excursions while also providing these hunting excursions. On the ranch were axis and fallow deer, black buck antelope, and wild turkey, as well as large ponds that offered catfish and largemouth bass for fishing. As you can imagine, Sandy came from a stable and wealthy home, and he likely wanted to be part of his family's business. But by 1989, they wanted to move back closer to San Antonio and settled on Olms Park, where Val started a private catering company. It wouldn't be until September that they would welcome their first baby girl, Lauren, into their lives that Val decided to fully embrace motherhood. She stepped away from their business. Her family, friends, and neighbors started to notice her pouring herself into her art, another form of creative outlet that she had taken, and all were fascinated by her Southwest-themed designs. And though she seemed to be in a little bit of a transition period here, there were consistencies in her life. Both Val and Sandy were extremely athletic, and they enjoyed the physical exertion. Sometime around 8 a.m. on the morning of Monday, August 5th, 1991, Sandy left to go to the gym while Val strapped Lauren into the stroller. Val wanted to go for a run, and one way to instill these athletic habits into your children is to include them. Maybe even if Val wasn't conscious of it, she was setting a really good example for Lauren. Now, pushing the stroller while running is no easy task. When running, you typically have your arms swing to allow for some momentum to help with proper form. But when pushing a stroller, you don't have that. Or maybe you only get that from one side. But then you have this mechanism that somehow the wheels never roll quite as well as they say they do. And when you turn, it feels like you're trying to turn a semi on sheer strength. And instead of just propelling yourself forward with every stride, you are pushing this thing that doesn't want to roll along with you no matter how much your baby weighs that's inside of it. Basically, what I'm saying is kudos to anyone who runs with a stroller. I am honestly honored to be passed by you in races. The route that Val was taking was not highly trafficked, shaded by these large trees. It was quiet, and it made for a good morning run. At 32 years old, Val was happy to be doing what she loved with whom she loved. As she got to the dead end on her road, she turned north. On one side of the street was more of like the neighborhood, so there were houses, and on the other side was a park or an activity area called the Olmos Basin Park. Again, this area really doesn't have any crime. So we are going to walk through this. Val started out on Stanford Drive and started moving east. She then turned left, so that way she was heading north along the East Contour Drive. East Contour Drive follows along the edge of Olmos Basin Park for almost the entire length, making it twisty and turny and beautiful. Running through this park, though, is Highway 281. Separating the highway from East Contour is a tree line and a creek. And one other thing I should mention about this road, there are no sidewalks. So walkers, runners, and bikers are moving along with vehicle traffic. It was as she was approaching this area that she noticed a man coming towards her from the opposite direction on the opposite side of the street. This is not unusual. People here love to be outside, and the number of trees allowed to grow here provides an incredible amount of shade to protect people from the hot Texas sun. Val continues on as she normally does, and it is just as they are about parallel with each other, nearly at the point of being past one another, that the man charges her. He rushes across the street, and before Val can fully grasp what is happening, he punches her in the eye. Val immediately puts herself between this man and Lauren and starts to try to get away. But this man was relentless, and in a matter of seconds, he pulled out a knife and started stabbing her. Val would be stabbed once in the right center of her chest, and this was as if the knife was being thrust upwards, so almost like someone had their hand behind their back, and in like one quick motion, they pulled their arm out and forward and slammed the knife up into Val's chest. Then she was stabbed 9 more times in the back as she hunched over and protected Lauren. These wounds were in the location of the upper back, just below her neck, and in her low back. Again, this all took seconds, and then he stopped and took off, and so does Val. She is pumped up on adrenaline, and she automatically is trying to put as much distance between herself and her baby and the attacker. Lauren is completely unharmed, and she makes it about 150 feet before she can't take another step. A few minutes later, a man by the name of Thibaut Bowen rounds the corner and sees Val, and he was friendly with Sandy and Val, and he knew them by first name. So remember, this road is winding, so he didn't see anything happen, but when he finally sees Val, she is hunched over on the ground, and while they are shaded, it is already 80 degrees out. So he sees her, he knows that it's kind of warm out, and he first thinks that she is suffering from heat stroke. As he gets closer, he sees that she is crouched down on one knee and using the stroller for support, and then he sees the blood and thinks that she was hit by a car. Val tells him that she is hurting. Everything is hurting. Thibaut doesn't live far away. He was just starting his run, so he grabs Lauren and rushes her to his home and tells his wife to call 911. He leaves Lauren with his wife and then returns to Val. Val still has no idea what happened. The 911 call was placed at 8:13 a.m., and in the meantime, Val is explaining to Thibaut that she was attacked by a black man who was around 6 feet tall. He was probably in his 30s to 40s, and he was stocky. He was attractive and well-dressed. She noticed that he had been wearing a clean, stylish dark blue shirt, pants, and red tennis shoes. When the ambulance arrives, they took one look at her and don't waste any time. They load her into the back and take her to the Brooke Army Medical Center at San Antonio's Fort Sam, Houston. During the ride, Val was also describing the man to the paramedics. It was during the ride, though, that she seemed to be unable to remember conversations. She was describing the man and asked where Lauren was, and then just rolled back and forth between these two conversations, which I think she would probably be in a pretty big state of shock at this point. Sandy, in the meantime, was located, probably from a neighbor who knew their schedules, and informed that Val had been attacked and she was being taken to the hospital. On first thought, Sandy thought that she had been robbed and that she was kind of beat up from that, but it would be when he arrived at the hospital to see staff diligently working on his wife's mutilated back that he realized this was something truly to worry about. Not that he wasn't worried before, but it was when he saw the scene of the hospital staff trying to save her life that he realized the gravity of the situation. And that sinking feeling in his gut wouldn't go away. At 12:07 p.m., Val flatlined and was pronounced dead. Thanks to Val being able to provide a description of her attacker, police ran a segment on the news asking for help locating or identifying this man, and the following day, they received 100 calls from people providing leads and potential names. Some of the people who lived in the neighborhood recall seeing a man who was tall and muscular walking down that same road. One was even able to provide really clear details, like he was wearing blue jeans and they were clearly tailored to fit him. Others called to say that they saw a man in a baseball cap, and others said that he had a really clean haircut. It would be investigator Charlie Parker who was tasked with shifting through all of this information. But outside of the description, they didn't have anything else to go on. The man didn't take anything from Val. He didn't harm Lauren. He didn't try to rape Val, so there was no real motive that they could find. She wasn't robbed. She was purely just attacked. And further, there was no physical evidence left behind. Despite the crime happening in broad daylight, investigators had no leads, no reasons, no whys, no motive. Texas Ranger Captain Jack Dean and Ranger Bob Steele joined the investigation, and with their efforts, some other avenues were explored, despite a sketch producing no leads and no murder weapon being located. Family members were questioned because the living spouse is almost always suspected in a murder. And Sandy, along with one other, even had polygraph tests done, both of which passed, indicating that they weren't being deceptive. We don't truly know if Sandy was ever strongly considered as a suspect or if the investigators were just doing their due diligence. But once he was cleared, he started focusing on raising Lauren as a single parent. Still, he offered up a $50,000 reward for information leading to the arrest and conviction of the man who murdered Val. By the end of August, there had been no movement in this case, and the media largely stopped reporting on it. In June of 1992, nearly a year after Val was viciously murdered, a second murder occurred, shattering the image of a truly safe town. Lawrence Monroe Leadenham was found stabbed to death lying in a pool of his own blood next to his car in a parking lot that was just shy of a mile from where Val was killed. While it seemed that Lawrence was killed in a robbery, the violent way that he was knifed down gave investigators an eerily similar feel to Val. It was during this time that a group of people came together who called themselves the Unsolved Crime Cold Case Group. It is this group that is self-described as amateur detectives, and in the summer of 1994, they reached out to Sandy for permission to come in and investigate, and Sandy said yes without a second thought. It is this group who, I don't want to say discovered, but they at least brought it to the attention that Val had a drug use problem, at least at some point, though they never clarified in what capacity or when this use was occurring, which then led them to believe that there could be a connection with those drugs and maybe a deal that went wrong, or even the potential that someone involved with the drugs wanted to get rid of her. This, of course, angers not just Sandy, but also the small community who loved their people. When the group had all the information they felt that they could get, they essentially created a report, and when they went to deliver it to the Texas Ranger, the Rangers in some way told them that this wasn't their case and their help wasn't needed. And as time has passed, nearly 35 years, it is impossible not to wonder if anything might finally be discovered. The chances of there being a smoking gun out there is very small, but not impossible. Lauren, who Val vehemently protected with her life, grew up in a very active lifestyle. She attended the same school as her father, went to college, and then got a job in finance. She keeps a photo of her mother in her home, though she never got to know her. Lauren and Sandy, along with many others, still hold anger for the man who tore Val from their lives. Rightly so. But I will end this episode with this. Val was stabbed several times in the chest and back with a knife large enough to do enough damage to kill her in under 4 hours. But Val's instincts were not to run, not to hide, not to lay down and comply. She protected her baby and then chose to escape with her. Val's efforts saved Lauren's life. Every dying mother's wish is that her baby lives. And while Val certainly would have loved to be here to watch Lauren grow, she did the best she could do under the circumstances. If you have any information about the murder of Valerie McPherson, please contact the Texas Rangers at 800-346-3243. Or to remain anonymous, please call Crime Stoppers at 800-252-8477. If you have not already, please go follow Tragedy with a View on Instagram and Facebook. I upload photos to go along with each episode, which will allow for a better understanding of the people, places, and events that are discussed in each episode. Even though I'm currently very behind on doing that, I will be getting caught up. I promise. You can support Tragedy with a View by going to patreon.com/tragedywithaview for as little as $1.99. You'll gain access to regular episodes, early release episodes, and exclusive episodes featuring stories of your choosing each month. Currently, there are 26 or more episodes for subscribers to binge. Thank you, everyone, for your support. Thank you for listening. We will chat again next week.